Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Lucky Brain Tumor podcast. I'm delighted to have with me today DJ. DJ, thank you for joining me for this episode.
Oh, I'm so happy to. When I learned about you doing this, I was so excited and I've listened to your episodes so far and they're fantastic. So I love what this is for the community.
Thank you so much, DJ. I really appreciate that.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
to
thank
get us
you. I mean,
started,
you've done so much great. Well, just gonna plug you because I know you've done a lot of great stuff. And so this is just another extension.
well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I do it all for everybody else because people were there for me, and I'm happy to be there for other people. It makes me feel really good to know that I can take someone's worst day and maybe make it a little bit better. So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
awesome. Well, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what it was like when you got diagnosed and what that looked like for you in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. My diagnosis came, I think, in July of 2023. Uh, I had been dealing with a little bit of hearing loss on my right side that I was kind of chalked up to, well, loud music, concerts. Not that I was a huge concert goer, but, you just don't think much of it. And I started to notice it more prominent probably that the year before. And in retrospect, there were a couple of things that I had kind of noticed, but just didn't think that they were significant. Like teeny tiny balance issues. I was building some stairs on a property that I'd lived on and into the hillside, and going up that was kind of interesting. And that spring, I had done a 10-day, 60-mile trek in Nepal. And again, it was never a balance issue where I fell or anything, but there were just a few times where it was like, oh, okay, it made sense in retrospect. But the thing that got me there, I had scheduled an audiology appointment just because I was like, okay, I got to figure out what's going on. This is substantial. Um, and then I also had noticed what I later learned was nystagmus, which is looking over to one side and I'd have a little twitching in the eye. I noticed it from shaving when I was trying to do that. And I went to an optometrist who was like delightfully nerdy about it. She was so fascinated by what was going on. And she did a lot of looking and checking. And then she was like, hey, this tends to mean something as far as brainstem. And that was the first time for me going like, oh crap, what's going on? And so she had made mention of referring for me for an MRI, and then she had access to my chart, and had seen that I was going for the hearing test, and so she was like, "Okay, yeah, that's the way to go." So I don't know if she never mentioned acoustic neuroma, or just even that it could have been a tumor, but something seemed to click for her. So then the usual thing, audiology, you need an MRI. I can't send you to go see this ENT. And I got referred to this guy who I swear was like 12 with a degree, but really nice guy, very young doctor, as informal as I could imagine. And so he very casually said the thing about, yeah, it could be a tumor, but it probably isn't, like 1% of cases. And I actually had to stop him and be like, sorry, you just said a big word and I need you to speak more to that. And he's like, oh, yeah. It's like, dude, do you not realize the impact of this term on somebody? Um, so of course, after the MRI, I spent probably the most scared 24 hours of my life between getting the results on my chart because it included, neuroma, meningioma, and metastasis. And I didn't hear back from him. I'd missed his call one day, so I just spent a day being like, "Oh dear God, brain cancer." Um, then I talked to him, and again, Mr. Oddly informally, he calls up, and I just pick up, hello, hey, buddy, hey, I just following up with you. And I was like, is this Dr. Subrian? Oh, yeah, yeah, it's me. But I mean, yeah, he was comical. He was a colleague of a friend of mine in Appleton, and so she spoke highly of him. So that helped because I think otherwise I would have been like, are you serious, dude? But anyway, so yeah, that MRI confirmed that. I got sent to a consult in Madison, where I met with Dr. Loesch, and then did a couple other consults. But yeah, that was kind of the figuring it out. And then I just Googling found ANA, and that was what connected me with just even any kind of information. Because, it's just a blank slate that you're trying to put information on. So, but that was, yeah, by and large, the discovery of it process and the diagnosis.
I think a lot of what you said is really relatable. I think the whole incremental changes that are really, really small and you don't really notice until you look back, I think that's really
Right,
common for people. And there can be this expectation that something as big as a brain tumor is like dramatic. But
right.
this is slow growing, and so it's often not really dramatic until it is. And
Yeah.
so it'll be like teeny tiny changes. Then you look back and you're like, wow, that all makes sense now.
hmm And interestingly, I had gone through a full audiology exam and noticed some one-sided hearing loss, probably about 10 years prior. And, it was one of those retrospective things. It's like, should somebody have flagged that? But, it really, because I was also dealing with some vertigo at
Oh,
that time. And so I remember being the possibility, it had kind of self-resolved for the most part, but they had talked about PT. But, it's like, would it have been found then? I don't know. What would have been different? I
right,
also don't know. We
right.
just don't know how fast they grow, even though I remember us in the young adult group connecting on how so many younger diagnoses are larger tumors.
Larger tumors. It's very
Yeah.
common. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's
Interesting.
just yeah, all that stuff coming together in retrospect is like, oh, well, now it makes sense.
Yeah. So how large was your tumor at the time of
Uh,
diagnosis?
3.2.
3.2. So on the larger side. Yep.
Yeah, so kind of like a ping pong ball size is kind
So
of what I figured.
walk me through your like decision making as far as treatment.
So it became clear as I started to have that first consult that surgery was the only option, and that's what it was going to be. Hmm. And I went for two different consults. Initially, I went to UW-Madison and then Froedtert in Milwaukee. The guy at Madison was great. It gave me a ton of helpful information. As I was sharing earlier, that uh, I had read a lot about facial paralysis, and I hadn't run into a lot that spoke to how much could be done. And so when he explained how there was facial reconstruct or not reconstructive, it was shoot, I'm trying to remember the term that sounds so fascinating. Oh, facial reanimation.
Reanimation. Yep.
It was like sound like science fiction, but I remember sitting in the office and hearing that. Um, and when he talked about there are things that can be done, like I just broke down because I somewhere in there I was terrified of that, and I don't know that I brought it to the surface as much. And actually, it was similar to when I got the confirmation that it wasn't cancer. I actually had to ask again that doctor very clearly. I was like, "Hey, dude, there was this third word. You need to speak to that." Um, and so it was just noticing that the stages of, okay, I can take this off the worries. And so he was incredible to meet with. We probably spent an hour with him. I mean, just was in no rush, very thorough. Um, so liked him. I had to wait quite a long time before I could meet with the neurosurgeon, Dr. Paskaya, who you also know. Um, and so in that time, I went to Froedtert. That guy did more of a thorough exam, but then wanted a different surgical approach. And it was just, for me, it was one of those, I'm not feeling super comfortable. Just, he was perfectly professional, but I'm the guy who says, if you're going to cut into my head, I need to feel comfortable with you. And if I don't, I'm just not going to let that happen. I had a lot of friends who would say, I don't care if they're a big, arrogant a-hole, if they're really good at what they do. And I had a lot of people telling me that. And I was like, that's fine for you. That's not what I'm going to do. So then I was set for that. And then I had a couple of people mentioning, like, hey, Mayo is right there. Why don't you check that out? And it was interesting because for a while I was like, well, I don't know. That seems like more hard to get into. Just something in me wasn't even open to exploring it. And I did. And they got me in within a month. And like I was impressed by that place from start to finish. So I met with their neurosurgeon and their otolaryngologist the same day. Oh no, on each side of a weekend. But basically, they were amazing. And the guy, the otolaryngologist, he said he'd probably done about 1,000 of these surgeries in his career, and so it was like, I'll take you. And so
Right.
they chose retrosigmoid as the approach. They were saying, again, very low chance of saving hearing, but maybe. Um, so yeah, very quickly after that, canceled the planned surgery with UW and set up late September for my surgery at Mayo.
Yeah. So tell me about what recovery was like.
Boy, I think you probably heard this a lot. I know we have, but that first night was awful. I was nauseous. I was so like, head spinning kind of stuff, and so I ended up just throwing up a couple of times, and I didn't remember a lot about that. And then my first 12 hours, ICU nurse was phenomenal, and then the next person was like this dude almost was like the nervous server who's like, "Oh, it's my first time. I don't know what to do." And I'll never forget this because they finally found a room for me and ended up being in like their VIP floor because they didn't ruin the regular floor. So I got this fancy suite and a personal chef that came and basically asked you what you wanted to eat, which is nice, except for the fact that you don't want to eat anything because you just feel terrible. But getting me to that floor, this guy didn't know where he was going. He like took me through a corridor where they were like, "Hey, you're really not supposed to bring people through here." And I was just so uncomfortable. I was like, "Just get me there." Once I got to the room, I was thankfully only there for a couple more nights. Had great staff. I was up and walking. I think I sat that first day. And then the next day, I was walking up and down the hallway of the walker. It was challenging. And I remember saying to myself and my then fiance, I was just kind of like, I'm going to kick this thing's ass. Like I'm going to, just determined on that. And so I did not sleep very well. The steroids, just I'm pretty sure I went through like probably all of my memory of the TV show Scrubs, which I love. Like I think I just entertained myself in rapid fashion through the night, and it just was one of those nights where I would look at the clock and think it has to have been an hour and it's 5 minutes. So the hospital was just like I thankfully got discharged. I got home, and I was out walking the first day with walking sticks, and it was I think in a way when you start with such a significant you know changing or such a significant impairment afterward, balance and all that. The cool part was how quickly you can notice progress. And but amazingly, I did not have much pain.
Hmm.
That was the thing that was very bizarre to me. It was like they just cut my skull open. And I really didn't have a lot. Like I barely took any narcotics. I didn't really take a lot of medication. But yeah, once I was home, it was not wonderful. It was a lot of boredom, but I think I had a pretty positive recovery experience compared to some of those that I've talked to.
Yeah. Wow. I agree with the motion sickness. That's like really, really hard right after surgery. And
Yeah.
I do feel like your nurses can make or break your experience. I felt like all of my ICU nurses were amazing, and I was so grateful to them because they did so much for me. And it's hard if the staffing isn't quite where you need it to be because that can really make
Yeah.
a difference.
Yep. Yeah. The last one I had was this lovely, lovely woman who just, I think she was basically like, yeah, I'm just going to stay later because then I can finish my whatever hours for the week. And she was exhausted, which part of me was like, okay. But, she was great. She took me through the medication. She was like, these are the things that are being given to you. You don't have to take them all, and
Mm,
was very good about saying like, here's what's necessary, here's what's kind of as needed, and she was just like, really, the less the better,
wow.
um, and just was really great about that. And she also had a great sense of humor. When she switched off from her first night to the second night she was there, she was like giving me crap and telling me I better be nice to the nurse that was coming in, and so she was a gem. I just thought she was one of the best people I encountered.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's awesome that you had so little pain. I've heard that from some people. It does seem to vary a bit
Yeah,
on the pain levels, but that's awesome that that was your experience.
yeah.
So, were they able to save your hearing with the retrosigmoid approach? No.
Nope, that was gone.
And you
Yeah,
knew
to
that
your
right
point, I
away?
didn't. Yeah, yeah, they knew that right away.
Okay.
Oh, and I should say that obviously I've got some weakness now, but coming out, I was fully slack on my right side, and so it's recovered way better now. But that took quite a while. But yeah, that was another thing to get used to. And probably the funniest thing was recognizing how saying P's and B's were very difficult because I didn't have that. Um, Oh, and the probably more comical part about the facial paralysis was that out of habit, I would take like a big drink of water for a big gulp. And I did that once without realizing I couldn't fully close my mouth. And so I had this little stream coming out. And thankfully I was near the sink, but it was like, and it's been 2 years and I still do that sometimes. Thankfully but I'm just kind of like, so
It takes a while to retrain yourself.
I'm a slow learner.
So let's talk a little bit about your facial paralysis, if you don't mind. Were there like
Absolutely.
particular things that you did to help increase like that muscle tone? Like were there exercises or did you use like specific eye drops? Like let's talk about coping mechanisms that helped with that
Yeah.
process.
So the biggest thing initially was obviously I couldn't do much closure of the eye. And so, I had eye patches and a little moisture chamber, but I had to kind of close it at night or kind of tape something over it at night. Um, but very quickly, I think it was 2 weeks after surgery, we went back down to Mayo and I had an eyelid weight put in. And that has been a really wonderful thing. I was talking to somebody in one of the support groups last month who took like 2 years to get an eyelid weight, which I was so baffled by that. I couldn't figure it out. Um, and I know there are different approaches. Someone recently talked about they did some sutures to try and help the eye close better by actually minimizing the clit or the opening. I don't remember exactly how it was done, but the eyelid weight made it so I could, close it enough at night and sleep. I had to have eye drops with me all the time. They call it a moisture chamber. It's basically an eye patch you can see through. And I, kept that with me pretty regularly. And there were times when it would just get dry and I'd forget the eye drops and it just was very uncomfortable. And so I'd have to just stop if I'd pull over or stop where I was in a store and just kind of hold it closed for a little while. Um, but that over time, now I'm living in a very, very dry climate in Reno, and I really don't ever use the moisture chamber. I don't really need it, except for when we're biking, then I need to do something just to kind of help that out. So that's gotten better over time. As far as the facial tone, uh, interestingly, I had a couple of times. I remember one distinctly, probably about a month after surgery, when this eyebrow just kind of raised on its own. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And it's not like it was in control and eventually came down. Another time in November, I was having lunch with my mom, and all of a sudden, this side went. She kind of looks at me. She says, "Are you doing that?" I said, nope. Um, but I had these little tiny increases. Eventually, I got some exercises that I don't know that I was prepared as well as I should have because I was just doing like, okay, just try really hard to make muscles move. And I don't know how much that plays a role with the synkinesis now. But when I learned over more thorough facial PT, it was like you're really trying to do very, very subtle movements because you're trying to work those muscles and not have others take over. Like my buccinator right here became very, very strong. And so, if I try and close this eye, that pulls back. So when I actually came out to Vancouver, Washington, I moved a lot after the surgery. Um, I got connected with the a facial specialty center at OHSU in Portland, and the PT there was phenomenal, and she got me going on that. And then I started facial Botox, just to kind of help with symmetry and also helped kind of cool this muscle down so the others could work. And so I'd say it's fairly plateaued. I haven't had Botox because of health insurance issues, and Nevada doesn't really have anybody who does that, and that's a long story. Um, but the exercises were, I think, a helpful part, and then just understanding, yeah, how I could both get it to recover, but also just kind of having to accept like this is the face now, you know?
Right. I mean, that
So,
it's a lot of different layers, right? Because it's actual P's and B's and drinking water and like physical tasks,
oh
but then it's
yeah.
also like the emotional impact and, going through all of that. That's a whole nother process besides just function.
Yeah. And on that point, one, I was honestly surprised at how accepting I was of it. Like, I don't think I was always somebody who was like, oh, look at myself in the mirror or something. But, uh, I think I was surprised because I didn't struggle as much as I would imagine I would have. Um, And to this day, like there's still moments where you see her smile and you're just kind of like, you don't love it, but it's like, well, this is who I am now. So I guess you don't you do have a choice, but you don't have a choice. Like that's just the reality. And instead of looking at as I have to get back to what it was, there's so many ways that, this is about creating the new normal rather than trying to hope to get back to one. Um, but what surprised me the most was very few people, but there were a couple of people in my life that seemed to have a harder time with this than I did. Quite literally, I had, well, I'll just say it, my ex-fiance, who this was a good lesson going through this about we were not meant to get married. But she literally told my parents while I was in the hospital, I think this is going to be harder on me, referring to herself. And I learned about that later. But, it just, like I said, I hope not many people go through that. But I know that some people struggle with visual differences and that there were a couple of people that were just kind of like, I don't think directly to me, but really were like wigged out by it. Funny enough, one person who was a physician and, it was kind of like, you of all people should know this. But yeah, that I don't think I've had a lot of negative experiences. And it's, I'm pretty subtle in general. There are a lot of people who say I don't notice. I think they're being nice. Um, But in general, just like anybody else that I've run into, it's kind of like, well, okay, that's you.
Right. I
But
will
yeah,
say, DJ, because I've known you through a lot of this journey,
yeah.
um, your facial paralysis has dramatically improved. And I
Oh,
think
yeah,
it
it is
is
incredibly
very
different.
subtle now.
Mhm.
And I'm very happy for you that you've seen so much improvement, and that you found so many things to help you along the way.
Yeah.
And I do just want to mention really fast the importance of that eye care, because if you don't keep your eye moist enough,
Yes.
you can end up with corneal damage and vision issues, which of course is the last thing you need when you're
Right.
when you're already dealing with all of these other problems and you need your vision for balance and everything else. So,
Yeah.
I've heard people not realize that their eye wasn't fully closing and
Mhm.
have some issues before it was caught. So it's just something to be vigilant on, is making sure that your eye is staying moist enough, because it is so incredibly important. And
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing all of those tools that helped you with that. So,
Yeah, those are huge. And I think I got the moisture chamber right away just because that was one of the things on that list I think you had shared with me.
yeah,
Um, And which I would say, if anybody's on the front side of this, just or recently through surgery and kind of being uncertain, as you said, it's like, no, take that very seriously, advocate a lot. I got lucky that I had a facial specialist at Mayo that was just like, oh, here's what we're going to do. I don't know if I would have gone for that right away just because I didn't know, but
yeah,
it was such a difference maker and not having to tape my eye shut. Oh,
yeah,
so much better.
yes,
Other hurt saran
absolutely.
wrap because can be helpful too.
Yeah, some people just do that. Yep, exactly. I mean, whatever you got to do, just keep it moist. Like that's
Yeah.
what you got to do.
Yep, absolutely.
So, you talked a lot about some balance difficulties. Did you do vestibular rehabilitation as part of your recovery?
Not through a PT. I mean, there was some balance that I think was inherent in it, but the stuff that I did was actually a lot with, I think the ANA guide.
Yep.
So some of the exercises for how you're walking on uneven surfaces, moving, kind of walking purposely while not always focusing on the ground or looking straight ahead. Um, but I remember I was talking to a peer mentor beforehand who had talked about, at night and, in the dark, it's really hard to have balance and it needs to be like almost pitch black for me to really have trouble with that. So I feel like I've been very fortunate. My balance came back very well. I was able to get back to cycling without any kind of an issue. I don't feel that is any major impairment for me. Like, every once in a while I'll kind of lose balance. And I remember joking with other people with, balance issues that you always want to tell your neighbors, like, I'm not drunk, I'm just taking out the trash. And sometimes this happens. Um, but yeah, I don't feel like it's a big issue. So thankfully I haven't needed that, but I know that can be a big challenge for some. And I think you talked about that kind of rehabilitation was very helpful.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is funny how the balance issues can be intermittent. Like you feel like it should be all the time, but it'll be like literally you just like lose your balance
Yeah.
randomly.
Hmm.
And you're like, okay, well, that was cool. Um,
Yeah.
so as you went through this whole diagnosis, what were some things that you found that really helped you?
I mean, acoustic neuroma association was just number one. I mean, that ability to connect with the peer mentors. I don't think I was able to join a group before my surgery, um, but being able to connect with the facial paralysis group, which I only was able to make once. I need to get back to that, but the I'm someone who never dealt with any particular like visible differences, and being in a group with people with the same or similar facial weakness was amazingly affirming. I guess that reminds me of people call it affinity groups or stuff like that, but it's like when you can share something like that, that was big. Um, and again, the young adult group where I got to know you and that has been such a huge thing. The other thing has been um, just the people in my life that have been so supportive and accepting. And it's, interestingly, I was engaged at the time shortly after I met my now wife. And that was a kind of a wild, fast turnaround. But we got together probably about 8 months or so after, or well, that was when we got married. Again, crazy timeline, another story. But we had known each other for 10 years. But she has always been this person who like just comments on how beautiful she thinks I am. And that, yeah, that's big.
It is. That's huge. And you need
Yeah.
that support and love and unwavering commitment in your life.
Yeah. And so, um, yeah, it's really brings a tear to my eye.
That's fantastic. And not
But
everybody is fortunate enough to have someone in their corner that way. So
yeah,
that's huge. And I'm so glad you
yeah,
have that.
yeah. And as I said, the person I was in a relationship with at the time, really struggled with it and had some other things going on at that time. I mean, her mom died like a month before my surgery. Like there was all kinds of difficulty, but it was a hard thing to go through when you're trying to help somebody else cope. And again, I don't think she handled that part. But I don't mean that to disparage her. She had a lot of stuff and it just wasn't the right match. But just the friends I had, the support that I had, and a Caring Bridge site.
Yeah.
I made one of those and I really kind of hemmed and hawed about it because I always think about, well, that's for cancer and things like that. But it was a great way to communicate. It was a great way to receive support. And I think as much as people will want to isolate sometimes during something like this, I really encourage the opposite. You don't have to be out in the world, but just having that support from people and being able to share that and for me to do it through writing was just perfect because that's a place I could communicate and not have to worry about my P's and B's.
Yes. Yeah. And connection and community is huge. And
Oh,
people want to be there for you, but they often don't know how. And so if you can tell them how to support you and describe what you need
yes.
and do it in a way that isn't expensive to you, because if writing is easy, because, talking one-on-one is hard, like that's perfect. And
Mhm.
maybe looking at a screen is hard for you. And so it'd be easier for you to send a voice note or whatever that is
Yep.
to figure out what isn't expensive for you and to do that to connect with people is just such an important tool in that time period
Yeah.
because it isn't the misery Olympics. We don't have cancer, but it still is serious.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as you said, I love the name of this podcast, the name of your blog, The Lucky Brain Tumor. It's like, it's still a tumor. It's not one that's going to threaten your life necessarily, but that don't mean it's nothing.
No, that you're living in that mixture of it's maybe the best brain tumor to have, but it's a brain tumor and no one wants to have one of those. So
Right.
it's
Right.
it's okay to ask for help and
Yeah.
we don't have to feel like we have to be self-sufficient.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah. Being
Absolutely.
able to lean on that was huge. So, and to advocate, so much that I've learned about being able to say, again, we were talking before this about the noisy environments or where you want to be, where you don't, where you want to sit, and just that balance between it's not about being rude, it's just about being clear about what you need and don't need.
Yes.
And
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 oftentimes your people, if they really are your people, would rather that you
yes.
speak up and say what you need so that you can participate and enjoy it than have
Yeah.
you suffer and they feel worse when they find out that you couldn't hear or that you were miserable than they felt
Mhm.
about switching seats in the moment. That was
Yeah.
such a small ask. It didn't really matter to them. Like they're happy to switch seats.
Yeah. And I think so often it's that whole thing. It's like, well, would I want someone to tell me? Oh, of course. Would I think that person was being rude? Heck no.
Right. Would I
Mm.
mind doing this for someone else so that they could be a member of whatever we're doing? Like, no, I wouldn't mind. I would want to accommodate them. I would want to include them.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that this has been really great, DJ. Are there any last thoughts or uh, advice that you'd want to give if someone who's maybe recently diagnosed is listening
Mm.
or, could use a little bit of support in this moment or encouragement?
Yeah. I think I'll just go back to something I said earlier. Um, just that again, it's not about trying to recover to a previous normal. And that can be hard, but I think that's one of those ways where, I mean, we've mentioned this, I'm a mental health counselor by profession. And so, I remember a colleague years ago saying it's like if he were to his, 8,000 years, I don't know, he's been a therapist forever, but, it's that when you're trying to change the things that you can't, that's kind of a big source of misery. And going through this, my wife has been not a super practicing Buddhist, but kind of identifies a lot with those principles. And there was a saying that at first I kind of bristled at. It says, "Your suffering is caused by your expectations." And my brain wanted to be like, "Well, you gotta have expectations." But through a few different things over the last 2 years, recognizing that, but if your expectations are no longer feasible or no longer, if your expectations aren't something that are realistic, or if your expectations are bound in something someone else is supposed to do, that just makes you miserable.
Right.
And so if the expectation is, well, I'm going to get back to looking the way that I was, your expectation is going to make you miserable. If I'm going to expect to go back to going out to bars, well, not that I was a big bar fly anyway, but, you know, noisy settings or things that I used to enjoy, I just have to create the modifications so that it's creating that new normal and kind of accepting like, okay, this is what it's going to be, and I can live really well within it, you know?
Yes.
Thankfully, I've not had to give up a whole lot. Um, and I can't say that I love noisy environments before, so sometimes maybe this is a good out. I don't know.
Right.
But I think that's the biggest piece I would say is just recognizing that, work on defining and loving your new normal because you don't have a choice.
Right. And change is hard, right? They always say nobody likes change except babies and wet diapers. And I had babies and they didn't even like getting their diapers changed. So nobody likes change.
Oh
Um,
my gosh, I love that.
but it is an inherent part of the human experience. Like we are not the same as who we
Yep.
were always, no matter what happens in life. That is just a literal built-in part of the human experience, but we don't like it. And
Yes.
so finding ways to adapt to your change and love where you're at. I have really enjoyed A Slight Change of Plans. It's a podcast by Maya Shankar, and she has a book
Oh,
too called On the Other Side of Change, which I really enjoyed.
ah,
And she talks about how change is so hard because we can lose identity. And
mhm.
so having to figure out what your identity is and how you can base your identity off of things that are more concepts that are immutable than the actual thing that you're doing, right? So
Yeah.
like if I can no longer go to bars, but what I really enjoy about bars is having community and having
Yeah.
connection with people. So, really, who I am is the person who connects with people. So, how can I connect with people in places that aren't bars if bars are no longer accessible to me? And I
Mhm.
think kind of looking at your life that way is so useful to hang on to what's important to you, but in a
Yeah.
way that you can enjoy.
Yep. Oh, beautifully said. Beautifully said.
All right. Well, thank you so much, DJ. This has been a
Yeah.
lovely episode, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thanks for doing this, Emily. It's great to see you.
You bet.